Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 333, oh my god, of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is David Howe, and boy, oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have some very special guests joining on the podcast today. Welcome. You know him, you love him. He's a wonderful actor. We got John Gholson on the show. Give it up. And then also we have writer and journalist Alex James Kane joining as well. How's it going, gentlemen? It's good to have you on.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Of course, I've got both of you on the episode today because we're going to be doing a very fun topic. We're going to be talking all about the exclusive Nintendo Star Wars games. That's right. Star Wars video games are kind of a genre in and of themselves. There have been so many, and there have been a lot that have been, if not Nintendo exclusive exactly, that are mostly known for being on Nintendo platforms. We're going to be talking kind of a bit of a history of Nintendo Star Wars games on the podcast today. Really excited about this. Everybody's been buzzing recently about Star Wars Outlaws on Switch 2. Apparently it runs like a dream. So we thought it might be a good time to check in on the history of those games on Nintendo consoles. We also have tons of news that we're talking about this week. Nintendo has bought a new studio. They acquired a Singaporean studio from Bandai Namco. Kill Bill has a new canonical chapter in the story that can only be accessed in Fortnite. There have been some new games added to Nintendo Classics and much, much more. But before we get into all of that, how are you guys doing? Did we have a good Thanksgiving week? How you doing, Alex?
Did pretty good. It was kind of chill. I was getting over an illness, so it was pretty low key, but we sort of sat around and watched the new Stranger Things batch of episodes and had chicken and noodles and casseroles and all that good stuff. So the obligatory pumpkin pie, which is like the cornerstone, right? So yeah. It was good. It was good. It was very low key, chill Thanksgiving. How about you guys?
I went to Tyler, Texas. I've kind of got this loose tradition now. I think this is the third or fourth year of going and having Thanksgiving with my oldest high school friend and his wife and family, that sort of thing. So we went and did that. We played a lot of board games, played a lot of Fallout Shelter, played a lot of Alien. Drove from Tyler to Dallas and watched F My Son in 35 millimeter. So I could show off some of the work that I've been doing lately.
Yeah.
That's what's been going on.
Good movie. Thank you for censoring yourself. By the way, you are allowed to swear on the podcast, but we try to keep the F-bombs to a minimum in the first, 5-10 minutes or so for the YouTube algorithm. I don't know exactly how that works, but hey, who knows? If you work for Google, please let me know. I'd love to understand that. I've been doing all right myself. Yeah, I was in Dallas for a good bit of time. That's where my family is. It was nice seeing my brother and his wife and my niece and my sister and my dad and my mom and just the whole family unit was together. I will say by the time I left, I was ready to go. And I'm glad to be back in Austin, Texas right now. Got here just in time for the cold snap. And it's nice to finally see some of these mosquitoes finally kicking the bucket and dying. We had mosquitoes around for way too long with this abnormally warm autumn, I suppose. They're usually dead by this point, but love not getting bit up. But yeah, it was a good time. Thanksgiving was good. I'm pretty full. It was a nice time to play some video games, relax, read some books. All around, no complaints.
Are you from Dallas?
I went to school. Basically, I moved to South Lake, Texas, which is up by Grapevine in the Metroplex. Moved there when I was like 7. And then went to like high school there, and then basically been in Austin ever since. Yeah, not a bad place to be from, but once you get a taste of the liberal oasis that is Austin, it's hard to go back to the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, as it were.
Yeah,
but hey, I'm having fun. No shade on the Christians. You guys have fun. Anyway, I think with all that out of the way, let's get into a little bit of shout outs quickly. Last week we did an episode on Kirby Air Riders, the newest first party game, at least for the next 24 hours, if you're listening to this on the day that the episode comes out. And that was a great episode. We had Hans Gauger on for that one. We also had Jordan. That was a really, really good time. We had a couple comments on the YouTube. Yo Wombo, I think I'm saying that right, said, woo, go Hans. We love Hans. Hans is a favorite guest here on the podcast. Also, Anatole VGC said, TikTok gooner-brained game. LOL. It's so funny because it's true. I freaking love this game. Absolutely. I do think that you need to be on a very high dosage of Adderall to properly enjoy Kirby Air Riders, at least in the way that Masahiro Sakurai intended. So thank you very much to both of you for the comments. If you would like to be shouted out on this episode, listener, please leave a comment down below the YouTube version of this podcast. We do a video version. I'd love for you guys to check that out. We've got 3 very handsome gentlemen on the episode today. No reason not to throw it up on your TV. We also obviously have the show up on Apple and Spotify. Leave a review over there if you wouldn't mind, and we'll be glad to shout you out, or hit us up over on social media. Those are all great ways to get in touch with us. We'll have more information about that and how to join the Discord at the end of this episode. But you know what? I think with all that out of the way, I'm ready to get into the news. How about you guys? You guys feeling news?
Sounds good.
God, I love the news. Here we go. We're going to start with a little bit about this new Nintendo studio. That is Bandai Namco Studio Singapore has officially been acquired by Nintendo, and has been renamed to Nintendo Studios Singapore. Some of you that have listened to the show for a while will remember we did talk about Nintendo opening a new headquarters in Singapore as well. So just as we have Nintendo of America, Nintendo Europe, and all of that, there's also a Nintendo Singapore now. So this comes hot on the heels of that. So it really seems like they're trying to increase their presence in the area, which, is good, I suppose. I feel like Nintendo doesn't make a ton of acquisitions. It's not kind of like the other big names where, you're always hearing about Microsoft buying out studios and then closing them. I feel like when Nintendo buys out a studio, they usually stick around for a really long time, and it really makes the news. Some of the stuff that they have worked on was co-development on Splatoon 3. And then they are also known as an asset studio. I think that they did a little bit of work on like Kirby Air Riders and Smash, but those aren't the Bandai Namco studios that mainly developed those games, the ones that like Sakurai taps to work on his stuff. But they did develop new Pokemon Snap, Soul Calibur 6, the NSO services in Singapore, some stuff like that. So they've been around for a while. I think they're mainly an asset studio. But any of you guys have any thoughts on Nintendo moving into the Singapore region? Alex, do you have any thoughts on Nintendo's expanding in general?
I mean, it seems like they've always got more studios than I'm aware of until I read some little news article about, such and such studio developed this particular kind of first party title. But I don't know. I played some of the Splatoon games, and I played new Pokemon Snap, and those are really quality titles.
Yeah.
So I thought Pokemon Snap looked really good. And
yeah.
I don't know. So
new Pokemon Snap is like the game that like all Pokemon fans point to, and they're like, why don't all the main games look like this? It's just not really fair, but yeah.
Yeah.
Is this stuff, am I dumb? Is this stuff like tariff related? Like, are we going to see more studios like pop up in unexpected places simply so that they can go ship from somewhere and ship out of somewhere where the tariffs aren't as high? Like, is this something, am I ignorant? Like, is this something we're going to start seeing?
No, I mean, that's not a bad thought. I don't know that this is necessarily, I'd need to like look up on what Singapore's tariff situation is.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is either.
Yeah, exactly.
I just didn't know if this is something like this is sort of Nintendo being proactive about a problem that we're going to see other studios start to address.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Nintendo has a lot of manufacturing hubs in like Vietnam and stuff. And I know a lot of that is just because sometimes it's less expensive to ship straight out of Vietnam to a lot of these Western markets than it is to go from Japan to China or wherever, right? So it wouldn't surprise me if that's the case. Maybe we'll hear about some new manufacturing centers like in Singapore. I think that would make a lot of sense. But if my money's on anything, it's just that we're now in like this new era of AAA game development with Nintendo. I think, we look at a lot of the new games that are coming out. I think it was like Assassin's Creed Shadows just dropped. Looks incredible on Switch 2. I think Nintendo just kind of realizes that like, oh, now we're working with next-gen hardware. Games are going to be getting more expensive. They're going to need more assists from different studios globally. So I just think this is them beefing up their workforce in order to meet demand for
Yeah.
our next gen kind of situation. But that would be my guess. I think the one thing I'll add to the end of this is that, you know, we have the logo here is very similar to the Nintendo Pictures logo and a few of the other recent acquisitions that Nintendo has made. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a lot of the Western studios, such as Retro, Next Level Games, be rebranded in this way as well. You know, I would hate for Retro to lose all their identity, but I think Nintendo Studios Austin makes a bunch of sense. I think what is it? Next Level's in Vancouver, so that'd probably be Nintendo Studios Vancouver. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. We'll just kind of have to see. But we'll move on to our next bit of news here, and that involves Kill Bill and Fortnite. That's right. We're in a new era of Hollywood movies taking advantage of Fortnite for I guess canonical storylines or something like that. But I know Quentin Tarantino has been very hands-on with the most recent crossover in Fortnite, that being a Kill Bill Lost Chapter, which I believe is called, what is it? Yuki's Adventure. Yuki's Revenge, I believe is what it's called. You guys have any thoughts on this? I know you guys are both kind of movie heads.
I don't know. What was the big one? Was it Palpatine in the third Star Wars where he made his debut in a canonical Fortnite event?
I think so.
Yeah. It's like, it left Poe Dameron saying somehow Palpatine has returned because he didn't play Fortnite, so he didn't get to see how Palpatine returned. It's so weird because I feel like a lot of these Fortnite things, my perception of Fortnite as a brand, I'm very old man when it comes to Fortnite because I think of it as something that kids play.
Yeah. And
so it's funny to me when they have like Obama give a speech through Fortnite or have Palpatine show up in Fortnite or stuff like this where it's just like, yeah, I don't get it. Like I don't get it. Yeah. It misses me. It misses me completely.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Kill Bill in years, I will say, but I am generally a huge fan of both Tarantino and Fortnite. I play a lot of Fortnite with my 8-year-old son.
Yeah.
Do
you watch a lot of Kill Bill with your 8-year-old son?
No. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is kind of a comfort movie that I throw on a lot. And then, I like Pulp Fiction because, who doesn't, and things like that. But it is a weird marriage for sure.
Yeah.
It seems like behind closed doors, if you had asked Tarantino a year or two ago what he thought about putting Kill Bill in Fortnite, it would have been like, he probably would have scoffed at it, but it's one of those things that apparently, the concept was appealing, like, a deleted scene kind of thing. So
right.
It's just surprising and unexpected from, somebody like Tarantino, who's like, I watch all my movies on VHS and, and he's like against digital movie theater projectors and things. So it's just funny. It's funny and ironic, but
do they show this on like a screen in the world? Is that the way it works? It's like there's a big screen in the world and people like the guy with the cheeseburger head and like whatever other Fortnite characters there are. They just,
I think
like
so.
All the avatars gather in like a drive-in under a gigantic global screen. Is that how this works?
I know that's how they've done it before because this is like an animated short that they're producing. And I know it's also going to be playing before the whole bloody affair. When that comes out soon, they're doing a release of both the movies back to back, which I was going to get tickets to, but then I saw the double feature at the Paramount in Austin recently. I'm like, I just watched both Kill Bill movies. I don't think I need to go see them again, even if it is like a slightly different cut. I'm gonna pass on that one for right now. But either way, it does seem to all be kind of promoting that. Either way, I hope this eventually, hits the internet or at least some sort of digital release because I'm not really firing up Fortnite a lot these days. It's kind of like I haven't played Fortnite in so long that whenever I like open Fortnite again, I'm completely overwhelmed by everything. So more power to everybody else. A little bit of a fun note here is that also Paul Thomas Anderson did a mini game of sorts for One Battle After Another that I think he also had a hand in that was supposed to be a continuation of the story within Fortnite. So we're just seeing the rise of auteurs utilizing Fortnite. I mean, look, if it gets more butts and seats, if that's what it takes to get Gen Z and Gen Alpha in the theater, I suppose that's all right. But very strange days indeed. We'll go ahead and move on to our next bit of news. And this isn't a super pleasant thing to talk about, but it's certainly something that we should cover. And this involves iiSU, which is an emulator front end for Android devices. you might have heard me talk about this before. This is something I've been very excited for over the past couple months. Namely because I did pick up that kind of dual screen Android-based AYN Thor device, which I've been really loving. It's kind of got a 3DS form factor, runs on Android, and you can emulate a whole bunch of devices on it. And kind of the whole purpose of this front end was just to have a kind of return to that Wii 3DS era of the Fruitiger Arrow aesthetic of Nintendo that you just don't really see anymore from Nintendo. They had a huge presentation last week, and then like 24 hours later, all this controversy started coming up about the creator of the front end, whose name was eShade or Usagi Shade. There were rumors about transphobia, racism within the Discord. Apparently, his Discord had been a personal Discord for him and some online friends that then got turned into the official Discord of this project. So, unearthed old comments were found. And then also there were some accusations of grooming on the part of Usagi Shade as well. I'm going to say I looked into this. I, tried to do my due diligence and actually kind of see what a lot of the context is here. And as far as I'm aware, it seems like a lot of this got a little bit blown out of proportion. I think there hasn't been a lot of proof for a lot of the, especially the grooming allegations. I've been really trying to find anything on that, and that's been really hard to find anything of. But I mean, there are some comments made by members of the Discord that had, transphobic, being of transphobic in nature, which of course is awful, and nobody likes to see that kind of stuff. But that said, it's put the entire project into a bit of a spiral. The creator, Usagi Shade, has stepped away from the project entirely. And there has been a statement from the rest of the development team saying that it's all moving on as planned, just without the involvement of the creator. If you watch that 20-minute long presentation, which is now no longer on the official YouTube page, which is wild, but there are mirrors of it up on YouTube, you'll see it is very ambitious. They really showed a lot of stuff, including social features, a shop, all this crazy front end stuff that was really pie in the sky. I think they'll probably be scaling some of that back, especially without the involvement of the creator. But that's just a bit of an update since we have talked. We did a whole episode a couple weeks ago on Nintendo operating systems and kind of their design aesthetic when it comes to these front ends. So I really hope the best for the rest of the team. And I hope that if there was any credence to any of these accusations against Usagi, that him stepping away is an opportunity for him to seek help or turn inward and try to make changes in that regard. But anyway, I've been really enjoying my AYN Thor, I have to say, and I was really looking forward to this. So I really hope at the very least that the rest of the development team can carry through, because it would really take advantage of both of those screens, and it's a really good time to be a fan of the emulation scene. And maybe if you're thinking about jumping on a bandwagon, make sure you do your research first, because I think a lot of these accusations seem to have no weight. Some of what I was seeing, some did, some didn't, but definitely seemed like there was an internet dogpile happening. So be careful what you participate in. That's all I'll say on that. But we'll move on to our next bit of news, and that involves Nintendo Switch Online. We got some new games coming to the Nintendo Classics service, and these are all really difficult games, kind of notoriously hard games, coming to the NES system. Battletoads and Ninja Gaiden 2, The Dark Sword of Chaos, have been added to Nintendo Classics NES. And on Game Boy, we got Bionic Commando and Kid Icarus of Myths and Monsters, the oft-forgotten sequel to the NES Kid Icarus games. Did either of you play any of these games?
I played Battletoads and Ninja Gaiden 2.
Yeah.
Back in the day. Battletoads, I mean, what else can be said about Battletoads and its unforgiving level?
You ever beaten Battletoads, Joe?
No, everybody. and it's it's one of those things where you go Battletoads on YouTube and it's going to be people talking about that one level, just like the Turtles underwater bomb level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ninja Gaiden, I remember having those amazing cinematic cutscenes, those awesome widescreen Ninja Gaiden cutscenes sort of between the levels.
Yeah.
Or it may have only been at the start of the game. I can't remember if they were between the levels, but that's what I think of when I think of that game.
Totally. What about you, Alex?
I think I played the Battletoads what is it, Legacy sequel or remake or whatever.
Right.
That was it was on Xbox like a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I watched somebody play some Kid Icarus on the 3DS, and some Bionic Commando game I remember playing, but I think it was like a Xbox 360 game or something. So yeah, not the like originals. Yeah, Ninja Gaiden. I think if I played one of those, it was like on the Xbox, right? The original Xbox. So.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, these are all very, like I said, notoriously difficult games. So it will be nice to kind of have them in a form factor where you can utilize save states, rewind features, and stuff like that. But it's nice to see both of these still getting updates. There was also some updated CRT filters added for the NES. That really nice CRT filter that was brought to the Super Nintendo and N64 apps is now also included in the NES app, which looks really, really great, especially on the Switch too. And the Game Boy app now has some new Easter eggs. Whenever you press a direction with your stick and you load the Game Boy app, it'll do like the BIOS, the Nintendo coming down and the little sound effect whenever you would turn on the Game Boy back in the day. So that's fun, I suppose. Somebody found that out immediately. But it's nice to see these still getting updates, and love retro games, even if I'm playing a lot of them on a third-party emulator device right now. But we'll move on to our next bit of news here, and that just is an update on Kirby Air Riders. We talked a lot about this game last week, but it's come out that Kirby Air Riders has sold over 195,000 copies in its first week in Japan. Japan always tracks its game sales down to like the exact unit generally. So this is a really, really good start for Kirby in Japan. I know that the other country that shows a lot of its early sales is Great Britain, where it did not sell nearly as well. I think it was maybe 12th best-selling on the week that it came out. So not a huge hit in the UK, but either way, I do think that this game is going to be doing pretty well, especially considering it's a Switch 2 exclusive. We'll have to wait for Circana to come out and show some of their numbers. I think that's monthly that Circana drops game sales data. Yeah. Our good friend Matt Piscatella, who we keep trying to get on the show. Maybe one day we'll be able to talk to him here on how he collates all that data. But either way, Kirby Air Riders, very fun game. And then just a little bit of a follow-up on that. There is a Tetris 99 Maximus Cup. They're still doing them. This time, it is Kirby Air Riders themed, and it is dropping December 4th. So that'll be this Thursday into Friday, and then over the weekend. Make sure you play that if you are trying to unlock those themes. Are you guys playing Tetris 99 still? I'm still playing Tetris 99 every once in a while.
I play Tetris Forever all the time.
Sure.
The collection by Digital Eclipse, but 99 I was really terrible at. So it was a quick relationship with 99.
It is for the Tetris hardcores, right? Of which there are dozens of us. I count myself among them. But that's definitely like that's a go-to pooping game for David for sure. But good stuff there. Still really enjoying Air Riders, even if I'm not playing it as much as I want to right now. There's just so many games coming out right now. But we'll move on to our last bit of news, and that involves Metroid Prime 4. And if you are listening to this podcast on the day this episode comes out, this game releases tomorrow. So heads up, gang. We are about to be in a whole brand new world, one in which Metroid Prime 4 Beyond exists. A few milestones here that are kind of crazy to think of. This game's been in development for 8 years. It was announced at E3 2017. This game predates this podcast. We started this podcast in 2019, I think, which is about the time that development moved over from what people actually assume was Bandai Namco Singapore over to Retro Studios Austin. The game's been in development for so long, E3 died during the development process. So that's an interesting little tidbit. And then also, to make you feel really old, Metroid Prime 3, the previous game in the series, came out 18 years ago on the Wii. So we'll see if this generation even knows what Metroid Prime even is.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about the title. Like, I get that it's Metroid Prime 4, but there's a part of me that wonders if it wouldn't be better suited commercially with like an all new branding.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of agree. Even if it's just dropping 4 and just having it be Metroid Prime Beyond, you know what I mean? I think that would have been fine. Either way, I think it's nice for the fans. I think Nintendo kind of knows at this point that Metroid is always going to have its built-in core audience and that it's kind of not a huge seller in Japan. It never really has been. It's very much a Western thing and for the Nintendo hardcores. So, despite the fact that this is reportedly the most expensive Nintendo game ever made, I think a lot of that is the restarting of the development across multiple studios. I do think that this game will do all right. Even if it just sells around like 3 million copies, if it hits 4 million copies, it will be the most sold Metroid game of all time, right? But I think Nintendo has so many 10 million plus selling franchises that they can take the loss on some things like this every once in a while, which is kind of good to see. And I think there have been a lot of reports about kind of one of the characters in the game that's like a big chatterbox, like early on. It's kind of like a nerd. I forget what his name was, but a lot of people were all doom and gloom on the internet, really dogpiling on Metroid, as we've talked about beforehand. Gamers are wont to do, right?
I actually had an awareness of that. So all that complaining leaked into my sphere of geek knowledge of bull crap that just kind of floats downriver your way. And it was like, oh, isn't there something about a character people hate?
Yeah.
And so, you hit right on it.
Yeah. It was a bespectacled nerd, very much like the three members of today's podcast right now. But generally, they don't have a place in the Metroid universe. But apparently, according to people that have the game early, the dude's in like the first 5 to 10 minutes of the game and then like doesn't show up for the rest of the game, or at least has very little impact on the game in total. So once again, it seems like people kind of are blowing a lot of hot air about things that they don't know about. But we'll have to find out next week when we do our episode on Metroid Prime 4 Beyond right here on Super Switch Headz. But I think with all that out of the way, we are going to call it there for the news. And we're going to move on to our main topic, which is Star Wars games for Nintendo consoles, right after this break. And we are back here with Alex James Kane and John Gholson to talk all about Nintendo exclusive Star Wars games. As we said at the top of the episode, tons of Star Wars games out there. It is a long-running video game franchise, so much so that it's kind of a whole, like, you could not even know about the movies and be a huge Star Wars fan just based on all the quality video games that have come out over time. Not all of them are amazing, but a lot of them are quite good. And on top of that, there are quite a few Star Wars games available on the Switch currently, Switch and Switch 2. We can give a little bit of a shout out to some of those a little bit later, but that's not really what this episode is about. A lot of these games do have re-releases on the Switch. A lot of them don't, but there is a long history of Nintendo consoles over time getting Star Wars games, and we wanted to talk a little bit about that specifically on today's episode. Before we get into this, into like the details of the specific games that have come out, I'd love to get just a history of y'all's history. That's not a great way to put it. Of Star Wars games in general. Alex, let's start with you. I know you're a big Star Wars fan.
Sure. Yeah, I had like 4 years of my life where I was kind of like the games journalist who was writing about Star Wars video games professionally.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's sort of like, oh, I need a break from Star Wars. And I think that was Rise of Skywalker's fault. I think we can just say that. So I sort of took a year away. And
something you'll notice, listener, is that all of the games we're going to talk about are legends at this point.
yeah, there's that. And then it was Star Wars Squadrons that kind of pulled me back. But I started with Shadows of the Empire, and I've since gone back and played some of the real classics like the 1983 arcade game. I've played the Atari 2600 Empire Strikes Back, which I believe is technically the first Star Wars video game ever released, something like that. And it's actually like really technically impressive for a 2600 game. But yeah, I love so many things within the Star Wars universe, from the comics and the novels to the shows like Andor, but I sometimes feel like the video games keep me around, like the Jedi survivors of the, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's hard to beat a really great Star Wars game. Some of the ones we're going to talk about today, like Episode 1 Racer, that really like capture the fantasy, you know. It's hard to beat a video game that makes you feel like a Jedi.
Right.
Or a pilot.
Yeah.
So that's me, I guess. That's my history. But
and obviously, Star Wars fans today might disagree, but I mean, Star Wars has obviously always been made with children in mind. It captures the imagination of children at a young age. So I think the ability to kind of embody some of these characters and kind of do the Jedi role playing, as it were, in a lot of these games, I know for me really captured my love. Early on, I remember trying to move things with the Force with my mind when I was a kid. I was a massive Star Wars head.
I was playing in the driveway, and we had a dirt driveway, and it was like where the tires dipped down was a big puddle, and it rained and filled with mud. And it was Dagobah. So I'm down there playing in that mud puddle in the driveway, and I have my X-Wing fighter there and all that stuff. And I went in the house to go to the bathroom or get something to eat or do something. I'm like 5, okay?
Sure.
And I come back out, and the X-Wing is gone. Like, all my other figures are there, and X-Wing is gone. And I'm like, I don't know where my X-Wing is. And my stepdad, he'd only been married to my mom at that point, I think less than a year, but he was like, you have to use the Force. If you use the Force to bring it back. And he had me concentrating in the yard, and he was like, if you believe strong enough, it'll reappear. And it didn't. And then I continued to play. I went in the house for something else. He had hidden it, and he put it back. Like, when I came back out, it was out there. And then he was like, look, it worked. You used the Force and you drew it back from wherever it was. So
George Lucas, you've done it again.
somebody tried to convince me that I could actually use the Force. But even at 5, 6 years old, I was like, that is bullshit. Like, this is not.
That's back when we were all believing in Santa Claus still. So we were pretty easy to fool, I guess, at that point.
First Star Wars game for me was so I'm a big movie nerd, and the movie theater in the hometown that I grew up in, Alvin, Texas, at the Alvin 6 had a Star Wars arcade cabinet in the lobby. Mm-hmm. I think they only had 2 games. They had Kangaroo and the Star Wars arcade game, and so that was way cooler than Kangaroo.
Sure.
So I played a lot of it there, and then I think a friend had Empire Strikes Back and the weird. I want to say there was one. Wasn't there a 2600 game where it's represented by a top-down view of Luke in that blinding helmet, swatting at the practice balls? Like,
maybe that's a little out of my purview on that.
It's like lightsaber duels or lightsaber power battles or something. Yeah, it has lightsaber in the title.
Yeah, but it's just you're not fighting people in the game. All it is a top-down view of his practice thing in the Millennium Falcon where the little thing is floating around.
Yeah.
And then I remember Empire kind of playing a little bit like Defender, like you have this long horizontal screen that you fly back and forth in the snowspeeder. I don't remember having a lot of fun with it. It was just cool to fire up and be like, oh, look, it's the AT-AT. And then, that's it. Or AT-AT. I don't know.
I've always said AT-AT. People say AT-ATs now, and apparently that's officially what they're referred to as, but I don't like that.
For Gen Xers, for old Gen Xers like me, it was always AT-AT. And it's only been recently that people have been like, AT-AT, that's an AT-AT. It's like, okay, I'll say whatever. Okay. I'm not going to GIF this conversation about AT-AT.
Yeah. So then we don't want to have a 3-hour discussion on that specifically, regardless of how long this episode will turn out to be. But I mean, obviously, I think in the past, really, again, since the Disney takeover, we have not seen nearly as many Star Wars games released. I think obviously, you've got the Jedi Survivor trilogy. Allegedly, there's a 3rd game in the works over at Respawn. We've seen a couple Battlefield games and a few things here or there. Star Wars Outlaws, as I talked about at the very beginning, being a recent addition to the Nintendo library. But there was a time when you would get multiple, 3 Star Wars games every year, something like that. So we're going to be talking about a lot of those. When I was a kid, anything that had the Star Wars logo on it immediately drew my attention to it. And I would, consider myself not as big of a Star Wars fan these days. I mean, if they were to release, Saw Gerrera's leftist infighting simulator, like the Andor spinoff, I would be all over it, right? But I'm not as big of a fan as I was when I was younger. I think the sequel trilogy kind of took a lot of the wind out of my sails for the franchise. But that said, I cannot lie that whenever I see that logo on something, say I'm in a retail environment, it's like my eye just immediately goes to it, right? Like I still have that shit hard grained into me, right? So, and I think a lot of that does come down to, I think the video games, and playing so many of these when I was a kid, and really just, trying to grab anything I could to kind of further the story that I had in my head of this kind of expanded universe, right? So really excited to talk about this today, and thanks to both of you for coming on this episode. But I think with all that out of the way, let's start going down the list, because if we're going to start anywhere, we got to start at the very beginning for Nintendo exclusive Star Wars games. And this game wasn't even released on the NES. This is a Japan-only Famicom game, and that is Star Wars by Namco. Now, there's not a ton to say about this game. This is definitely not one of the better regarded games in this episode, I'm sure. But this is the first Nintendo exclusive Star Wars game. This game is brutally difficult. I fired this up a little bit earlier today. I think you pretty much get one hit killed from every single enemy in this game, and it's really, really hard to get anything done. Not the least of which because I don't speak Japanese. But did either of you have any experience with this game? Are you familiar with this at all, Alex?
No, I think I've only played like Super Star Wars over the years, and I played the Empire Strikes Back on Game Boy. But with this, mostly I know it through its reputation with the Scorpion Vader anecdote, and just kind of the unique. It was back from that era where you could get away with a lot of things in video games. Kind of. If it was fun, you put it in the game, as opposed to like nowadays where you have all these like licensing and marketing layers. You have to do 10,000 approvals on every little thing that goes in, right? But,
absolutely.
I saw Darth Vader transform into a pterodactyl in ancient Egypt. I watched a little bit of this, and it wasn't just, I mean, specifically, it wasn't a sand level. There were pictures of King Tut in the background. But Darth Vader jumps up and turns into a bone pterodactyl and then fights Luke Skywalker. And I was like, oh, this is a lot different from what I remember in the movies.
Yeah, that's the kind of game you're dealing with here. It seems like, they had a little bit of what made this game good, but I mean, the game starts and you're Luke Skywalker and you just already have a lightsaber and you're just, blasting through random enemies. It didn't take a lot of the story from the game, but it did start with the opening crawl, like so many of these games do. I think that's kind of where we start to see that pattern, right? Is the iconic opening to the movies is always replicated in almost all of these games, whether it's the lowest spin-off all the way to the mainline games that kind of tell the story. But like you said, Alex, I think this game is kind of mostly known for that first boss where you fight Vader right off the bat, like in the first 2 minutes of the game, and he turns into a giant scorpion, which I believe was canonized. Is that correct? I think somebody put a note in here on that. Was that?
Yeah, I put the note in there. LucasArts alum Chris Baker, who he writes about Star Wars games a lot and has a book about Star Wars video game history, and I think he works at PlayStation as of late. But he pointed out back when Jedi Survivor came out that there was, in the sort of bestiary of the data bank, there's the it's like literally a golden scorpion with the same little horns that Scorpion Vader had in the Famicom game. So
there you go.
I think he's right. I think it's a nod to that first game. So.
All right, we're all gonna have to learn Japanese so we can learn exactly where this fits into the timeline. This game here, but not the best game, but it is one nonetheless. The next game we'll talk about here was released in the US, and this is actually a couple games. Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back were both released in 1991 and 1992, respectively. These were published by JVC, and this is where you start to really fall into the style of game that then becomes where they went with the Super Star Wars games, right? These were developed by Beam Software. which I believe is an Australian development studio. They've since renamed into something else, and I'm forgetting what it is right now. But these are much better games, a lot easier to play. They're still very, very difficult games, but they have a little bit more structure. You actually have a health bar in these. You're not just one hit killed every single time you take any damage. And these follow the storyline of the games, or excuse me, the storyline of the movies a little bit closer. You know, they're still taking a little bit of creative licenses. And I think a lot of these games, you never want to just have it be every single thing that happens in the movie and that's it. You always want to have some kind of side adventures. But these games are really fun. I never owned these games, but I have played these over the years on emulators and whatnot. But yeah, these are definitely worth talking about. Do you have anything to add on these, either of you?
I owned The Empire Strikes Back for Game Boy. It was kind of like the first Star Wars game I actually owned and, you know, and had in my bedroom and just played all the time. And it was hard as hell, but it had beautiful pixel art. So I think the Game Boy versions of this were done by like Ubisoft back in the day. And yeah, the sound, like the music is still great on those, and the pixel art is really awesome. But yeah, I don't know how much time I ever spent with the NES versions. Yeah, I don't know. I think I wasn't like a fan of Star Wars when we were playing like NES games as a kid, but they look gorgeous. I mean,
totally.
The land speeder, you know, looks gorgeous and stuff. So.
Yeah. We've got on the video version here kind of a cockpit, shoot 'em up section with some TIE fighters. And for the NES, I mean, the graphics were really, really excellent in these games.
That's the thing. I had Empire Strikes Back as an adult. I had a pretty big NES collection in the early 2000s and had gone back and bought a bunch of games. And I had Empire Strikes Back, and it's crazy. I was looking at videos of it, and I had no idea that there was so much variety in the levels. There's like one level looks like it almost plays like Time Pilot or something, where it's like a scramble style shooter. There's like levels where you get to drive the AT-ST. There was so much in it where it was like the first level was so hard you couldn't even crack the nut on seeing like the cool stuff that was in the game later because it was so difficult.
Yeah,
I had no idea that stuff was sort of after the first couple levels because it's just such a hard game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something that you kind of see with the other JVC Star Wars games as well. You know, there's a lot that I think people just never really saw, like especially back in the day, you know, when there were no save states and there was no real way to, cheat your way through the game. It was just like, especially if you rented this thing, you know, you'd play like the first level and fail over and over again and just never see any of the cool shit at the end, right? But yeah, there is quite a bit of variety in the style of the games. You have some top-down speeder sections. It ends with a top-down trench run on the Death Star, at least the original Star Wars game for the NES does. But these are really cool games. I'd love to see all of these games, especially the ones that were published by JVC. I'm not sure where the rights lie these days, but I'm sure like the NES games and the Super Star Wars trilogy, it'd be really nice to see a kind of re-release of those all together as well. But yeah, good stuff there. Let's move on then to the first Star Wars games that I ever owned. And this is the Super Star Wars series. Actually, before we go to that, I do want to say, because you brought up the Game Boy games, Alex, and I do want to mention that if we were to talk about all the Nintendo exclusive handheld games, this episode would be way, way longer. So we're kind of going to be doing a little bit of a honorable mentions at the very end. Game Boy Color, Game Boy Original, and Game Boy Advance had a ton of exclusive Star Wars games, some of which are very good. And there are a lot of YouTubers out there that actually cover a lot of this stuff. This is a great resource in researching this episode that I would definitely give a shout out to. We'll have links to some of those in the description of this episode. But I think let's move on to the Super Star Wars series. I loved these games when I was younger. These games are incredibly fun, very challenging, but a little bit less so than the NES games, I think. Graphics were way better, utilized a lot of the Mode 7 whenever you're doing the speeder stuff. You know, you had that kind of faux 3D look, especially when you're doing the Death Star run at the end of the first game. There's a lot of that kind of faux 3D aesthetic. You could play as multiple characters. You could play as Chewbacca, Han Solo, Luke. I think you could play as Leia in the third game, at least, in Return of the Jedi. But yeah, again, these were published by JVC. They were developed by Sculptured Software and LucasArts. I do know that these have had recent re-releases on PlayStation. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was part of a bundle to promote. I think it was when the 2015 or maybe 17 Star Wars Battlefront came out. They had like a PlayStation exclusive bundle of like classic games. And so that included the original Super Star Wars. And so now you can get it on PS4 or PS5 for $10, just the first one, I believe. And
Okay, gotcha.
so yeah, I played it a little bit on there, and it feels, as good as it ever felt. A lot less floaty than like the Empire Strikes Back in, on the Game Boy, much more responsive, but definitely punishing, like,
Yeah. I just, something about these games, and I know a lot of it's probably nostalgia, but it's just, they feel really cozy to me. Like, I just love like the Super Nintendo, like sound chip, and the way that the soundtracks like, play out in this style, like the John Williams themes and everything like that. I think like the NES game had a bunch of random music in it, right? There was like some stuff in it that is from John Williams, but the majority of it is just stuff that was made for the game. This actually had kind of like, your first attempt to like really do kind of like 16-bit chiptune versions of the John Williams scores. And I think it played really, really well. I love, early on in the first game, the kind of Jawa sand crawler levels were super fun. Started as kind of a shoot 'em up game, and then eventually you get your lightsaber. And then I think in Empire Strikes Back, you start with a lightsaber, and just really, really fun games all around. I enjoyed these quite a bit. Did you play these at all, John?
I did. I find them way too hard. They require a level of patience on platformers that I don't have.
Yeah.
Star Wars, I thought was pretty brutal, and I thought Empire Strikes Back might be more fun, and that it was just as brutal. So I kind of tapped out on Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
So when Return of the Jedi came out, that's the one I played the least, because I think a friend rented it and I played it over at his place. But the first two were games that I had rented, thinking like, oh, this is going to be my game for the weekend. And then it being so hard, I don't know that I really pushed through very long.
Yeah, they're definitely hard. That's, again, just another reason that I think it would be great for these to come to Nintendo Switch Online, because I think these games would be so fun to play with the rewind feature. I just think it would be super fun to have these games back where they originally started on Nintendo. And again, they are on multiple platforms, but I think if you want to really play these games through in their entirety, I think an emulator right now is probably the best way to go. I think these games are probably a little bit pricey to find the actual original and Super Nintendo versions right now, but these games originally came out in 1992, 1993, and 1994. So they were coming out one a year, kind of all leading up to, there was a dearth of Star Wars content in cinemas, basically after Return of the Jedi for quite a while. And so, it was really just these early video games. And then it was kind of as, Lucasfilm started pushing towards doing the prequels again, and the next project that we will talk about here being Shadows of the Empire, that's when they were really like, okay, we're going full multimedia on Star Wars. We've got all the books out at this point. We've got Shadows of the Empire, book and soundtrack and comic and game. And then it was just a deluge of games from then on out. And that's when the real merchandising push really began for the series. But let's talk about Shadows of the Empire. This game came out in 1996 for the N64. It also did have a PC port that I believe came out the following year, maybe 1997. But this was a huge, huge project. Basically, Shadows of the Empire, if you're not familiar with the totality of the project other than just the game, it was basically everything but a movie, right? Like, I actually own the soundtrack for this, book
project
essentially, like on vinyl, which I bought recently. I love the soundtrack for this thing. It's not done by John Williams, but it's definitely done in his style. And it was just, it was basically them seeing like, is there still, a want and a need for Star Wars going into the release of like the special editions in 1997, right? When they re-released the movies in theaters for the first time. And, as far as Nintendo's concerned, this was a huge part of the marketing for the Nintendo 64. If you'll remember, whenever the N64 came out, there were stormtroopers on the box of the N64. It was a big, huge push. It was supposed to be a launch title for the N64, and I think had a lot of development delays, and eventually came out a little bit later that year that the N64 came out. But I'd love to hear some of y'all's thoughts on Shadows of the Empire. It's an oft-maligned game. I think it's got its problems, but I certainly love it.
It was a system seller. It was. I worked at a video game store in the late 90s, and it was something that could move systems.
Yeah,
people get hands on with the snow speeder level at the beginning, and want that. I want to play that. Give me more of that. And so it was really something that helped move N64s. I was going back and looking at it because this was one that I had played, and I realized I got pretty far. I think I got about 3/4 of the way through the game. And much like the Battletoads level, there's the Mos Eisley Beggars Canyon stuff where you're on this
the little speeder
speeder bike racing through Mos Eisley, and that I couldn't pass, and I ended up tapping out at that after several attempts at racing through Mos Eisley. But yeah, it was this was a game that moved the needle for Nintendo.
Totally. Yeah, I think it also started the long tradition of every 3D Star Wars game having a Hoth level in it. Is an excellent way to start this game. Really made you feel like you're part of the movie right off the bat. And then all of a sudden, wait, I'm not Luke. I'm this guy, Dash Rendar, this whole new character, right? And it's like, oh, who's this? He's kind of like Han Solo. And then you realize, oh, this is set between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And then all of a sudden you get really invested, I think, in the story in general. But yeah, I have a lot of great memories with this. What about you, Alex? What are some of your memories around this game?
Yeah, it's one of the earliest Star Wars memories I have, just friends who kind of had older brothers and kind of knew the gravity around Star Wars in a way I didn't really. They knew that Shadows of the Empire was going to be a big deal. They knew that the special editions were going to be a big deal, and Phantom Menace and so on. And so the N64 was the first console that I remember going with my parents to Kmart or whatever, buying the console, bringing it home, playing Mario, Star Fox, etc. So Shadows of the Empire, I don't think I ever owned, but it was when I hear that Asteroid Field theme by John Williams, I don't just think of Empire Strikes Back. I think of Shadows of the Empire.
Yeah.
Almost equally when I hear that music. And I don't
because when you're playing a game, the music loops over and over and over again. You get this real sense memory whenever you hear it, right?
Yeah. You can not play a game for 20 years and you go back to the N64 games on an emulator or something. It's oh man, I love that music, I remember that. And Shadows of the Empire is a really strong, just kind of too difficult for me to play now without using cheat codes, because there are cheat codes, thankfully.
Wampa Stompa, that's one of them, I remember.
There's a whole list. I think one of them is LucasArts tester type of deal or something like that, and it just unlocks all this stuff. But it's a technical marvel. It's I think it's 5 game engines sort of stitched together into one. It's the first time that they went full maximalist, this is a Star Wars film that you can play. A lot of the old games, I sort of mentioned 2600 Empire earlier, it being just the Battle of Hoth. Well, the Battle of Hoth is just the opening prologue of this game. It's sort of widely regarded as still the one, maybe the best iteration of the Battle of Hoth, or at least until the 2015 Battlefront came out. But it's a really cool looking game. It has, all these characters like Boba Fett showing up and IG-88, and it's a really good time. If you're using those cheat codes like me. But yeah, it's just, it's so Dash Rendar is such a 90s idea of Kmart Han Solo.
And he's and his ship too. Is it the Skyhook or I forget what it's called, but
I want to say it's the Outrider.
That's it.
Yeah. And the Skyhook is the Shizor's space station or whatever.
Okay, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. But Dash Rendar's ship is it's like you cut the Millennium Falcon in half, and it's like it very much. It's like it's Temu Millennium Falcon for sure.
Yeah, the GoBots version or whatever.
The Kids Bop version, absolutely. No, but I love it, and I think this is actually a really cool story. I think I don't know why they made this not canon anymore. Whenever Disney took over, they basically everything that wasn't the movies and the Clone Wars TV show was essentially cut from canon. But I always thought that if there was anything that they should have kept, they should have also kept Shadows of the Empire, because I think it's a pretty cool story. And I think like all in all, it really added, at least for me, I read the book when I was a kid, and I really enjoyed it. And it was just really easy for me to place it in that kind of timeline. And it kind of told, I think, a pretty critical story that takes place between, because it's like 3 years or something, passes, or at least what feels like that, between the, fifth and sixth movie in the franchise.
I don't think it's been erased. I think it's been, because isn't Shizor in Outlaws?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, basically the Disney era of Star Wars, Lucasfilm or whatever, like they will pluck stuff every once in a while.
That they're not answering whether or not, they're not definitively saying it never happened, and they're still like cherry picking Easter eggs from the old EU.
Yeah.
So it may not be dead yet.
Yeah, I'd love to see it come back, even if there's an animated Shadows of the Empire movie. Maybe that's a good way that they can.
I think Ahsoka said in the Rebels animated show, she says like there's always a bit of truth in legends, and that's kind of been their philosophy, is like, they bring stuff back when they feel like it,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think they did put Dash in like one of the reference books or something. So he's out there.
So he exists. He's real.
We've seen the Outrider. Yeah. We've seen the Outrider ship style, show up in some stuff.
Yeah. I think it was in like the 9th movie or something, which, to be honest, I tried to pretend doesn't exist. I wasn't a huge fan of that film. But anyway, it's part of the canon. We have to deal with it, but we'll move on from there. Great game all around. I think that, it's got its problems. It feels janky. It is definitely, this came out the same year as like Mario 64. So really video games are just figuring out how to be in 3 dimensions at all at this point, right? So for an early game in that era, I think it does a pretty decent job. If you're going back to it, know that, it's going to have some issues. If you want to play the game, I think it's available on Steam. The PC port is maintained pretty well. I think you could, probably play that reasonably well on a Steam Deck to this day if you're trying to play it portably. Hopefully we see this come to Nintendo Switch Online or be re-released on the Switch. I think Aspire would be a great person to bring this back, because they've been bringing back a lot of the old games, even if some of their ports are so every once in a while. But we'll move on to the next N64 exclusive Star Wars game, and this was Star Wars Rogue Squadron. This came out in 1998, and man, this is an all-timer. This is from Factor 5, and this is published by LucasArts. Obviously, the Shadows of the Empire was published by Nintendo, developed by LucasArts. But this is the beginning of a long-standing relationship between Factor 5 and Nintendo. And this game was just phenomenal. I think it really made a lot of use of the expansion pack for the Nintendo 64, or the, whatever, added more RAM so you could have a little bit more of actual, quality in your video game footage in this game. But I loved how this game played. I think it's one of the best flight games. It's not like super technical like TIE Fighter for the PC or X-Wing, but it feels a lot more like, I think it's the best of the like arcadey, flight games in the Star Wars canon. This was the start of a trilogy as well. And I just played the shit out of this game. Do any of you guys have anything to say about this game in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, I have a strong memory of the hangar, for one, being like where you selected your ship, and like, it was just, there was like the U-Wing, and there were all these different ships from the movies, but then also like some that were either unique to the game or from, it was also the first time I'd ever encountered them pulling from other parts of the universe, like the comics and the books and stuff. Like the story of Rogue Squadron, the game, has like the World Devastators from like the Dark Empire comic book series, which I've later gone back and read. And
those are wild comics.
Pretty cool. It's pretty damn cool. The art is just outstanding. I mean, the story is like a little far-fetched or goofy maybe for some people, but it's just a fun time. And so, yeah, I think if you do Rogue Squadron playthrough and then sort of seek out some of the stuff that ties into it, you can have a really good fun time with that. But
totally,
I never read like there's all those X-Wing novels too, so you could really go crazy with it.
Yeah. What about you, John? Did you play the Rogue Squadron for the N64?
Yeah, I remember when I was looking at it, I remember playing it at the store that I used to work at. And I had good memories of it. I thought the graphics held up pretty well. There's a lot of fog, but that's just, that's system limitation stuff. I thought that when I went back and looked at the footage, I never owned it, but I was like, oh yeah, I played this. Like, this was fun. This is an enjoyable game. Mm-hmm. Good memories.
Yeah, totally. I loved it. It was also, it came out in 1998. So, this was post the special editions of the Star Wars movies being re-released, but before Phantom Menace, right? So there was, I know, a code you could put in to get the Naboo fighter at the end. I think there was also a code you could put in to get like a Corvette, like a car. It was like an American car that you could unlock and fly around with as well. I really remember that in particular. But I loved, I just miss the era of cheat codes in general. I feel like cheat codes have been replaced with microtransactions, which is not a great future that we have to live in right now. But really
Bring
great
back
game.
Big Head mode.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, DK mode for sure. But we'll move on to our next game to talk about here, which came out in 1999. We're going to take a little break. We'll come back to Rogue Squadron and Factor 5 in general. But next, we're going to talk about Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. Now, this one doesn't exactly fit here. I mean, it didn't come out for the PlayStation, but this game did release for the Dreamcast. So, and obviously, it also had a PC port like a lot of these games. But we're going to talk about it because I feel like this game is primarily known as an N64 game first and foremost. And I am one of the 15 people in the US to actually own a Dreamcast. But Star Wars Episode 1 Racer was a hell of a game. I loved this thing. It was developed by LucasArts. It came out one day before Star Wars Episode 1. So all the kids that were eagerly waiting to get out of school early in order to see Phantom Menace when it released were able to, the day before at least, whet their appetite a little bit with this racing game. And man, I mean, the pod race is the best part of Star Wars Episode 1. I think we can all agree with that. That really holds up to this day. I love this game so much. I'm a huge fan of futuristic racers. Like, I love F-Zero and Wipeout and games like that. So this really tickled my pickle. John, did you ever play Star Wars Episode 1 Racer? Was this for you?
Yeah, I had it on Dreamcast. I think there was a PS2 version as well. But yeah,
I think it was the sequel. It was the Racer Revenge, I believe, was the PS2 version.
Was it Racer Revenge?
Yeah.
I associate the N64 version with my time at the store being the thing that sold expansion packs. That's the mental association I have with Racer, was people picking up Racer and buying the expansion pack for Racer.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's kind of like, it reminded me a little bit. I played it recently, and it reminded me a little bit of when I used to play Wipeout when the PlayStation first came out. Mm-hmm. And when I went back to play Wipeout after like 10, 15 years of not playing Wipeout, I was like, why did I like this? And I had a little bit of that feeling where it's like, I played the crap out of Episode 1 Racer. And when I went back to play it again, I was like, oh, this is kind of jank. Mm. But I think at the time it was still like, there were some not great Episode 1 games that all came out within a couple of years of Episode 1. And this was on the better end of those games. Even if it was a little floaty and a little, I mean, but that was trying to replicate the pod racer experience, right? Like it's supposed to feel floaty. It's supposed to feel a little jank. So I'm sure that's a difficult thing when you're trying to balance your gameplay. Like, how do we create a game that's still fun to play where the floatiness and the jankiness is intentional to to the license.
No, I agree. And I think what they did do well is really capture the speed. I think that, I really love a good fast game. I think, a lot of the modern, Sonic games are not like super great games necessarily, but I just love like the sense of speed and momentum that you have. And I think this captured that really well. And yeah, like you said, this game has had a recent re-release, and it is available on the Switch for those that want to play it. And that is cool that you played it on the Dreamcast. I thought I might have been the only one. What about you, Alex? What's your like history with this game?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of my favorite Star Wars games back then. I think it still holds up, probably maybe the best of all the 90s Star Wars games, or certainly up there. I like that it's they had such a great cast of characters and pod racer designs in the film itself, and they translated those beautifully into the game. And so it kind of has that Mario Kart quality or Smash Brothers quality of like, oh, I like this guy and I like this racer. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but Ben Quadinaro's heads rise up, Yeah,
and Gazgano.
Yeah.
And, I think Gazgano might have been mine, or was it Odie Mandrell? I like
Odie Mandrell is cool. Yeah,
the big red engines. The red ones are cool.
Totally.
And then there was like the one that was like supposedly the fastest, which I don't remember if that was like Dud Bolt or who that was, but
who's the one that goes, do you know what I'm talking about? That guy?
Yeah, I'd have to look it up.
And then he like explodes.
He explodes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good shit, man. I mean, I think out of all the games, it's like the pod race just like lends itself to a video game like perfectly. It's like almost like they came up with this whole section of the movie to make this game. You know what I mean? Like it's just like really filled out that whole section of the movie as its own kind of, you get to see what the whole circuit is like and the whole tournament and whatever. So I really, really loved this game growing up. I do think it's held up pretty well. I agree with you, John. Like playing it now, you realize you have a little bit of rose-tinted glasses, like looking back on it. And there's been a lot of futuristic racing games that have come out since then that I think kind of have eaten this game's lunch. But overall, I think it's aged remarkably well, and it plays really well in high def on the Switch. And that port is by Aspire, who does a lot of the recent stuff. I think it's based on the PC port of the game. Great stuff. Yeah, and like you said as well, I think around the same time, this is when we got the Phantom Menace game, which came out on the PlayStation at the same time, which I also played and I did enjoy, but I think Episode 1 Racer is the superior game for sure. This is the last of the N64 games that we have here, but a spiritual successor of sorts to Rogue Squadron was Episode 1 Battle for Naboo. I never actually played this game. I always wanted to, but I couldn't really justify getting it because I was still playing Rogue Squadron at the time. But this game came out in 2000, so it was like about a year after the movie came out. And this was essentially, a Rogue Squadron game, but entirely set within the timeline of Episode 1. So I don't know if any of you guys played this game. I know it also had a PC port.
I completely memory hold this game.
Yeah.
Like I forgot this was even a game that existed. And then I was watching a little bit of footage from it. And the first level was so ugly that it's like this low to the ground sort of vehicle, like traveling through the streets of Naboo. It was not, we used to put games on at the store, like whatever the new games are, and they loop on the TVs. I worked at Game Fellas here in Austin. There'd be 3 TVs up and they would loop these games. And you'd pop in whatever was new or had interesting graphics or whatever. And I think that this is one that like, it was probably that first level was so rough looking that it wasn't something that we put in very often.
Sure.
Yeah. I completely forgot that this game even existed. Just totally memory hold.
Yeah. Apparently it's just as good as Rogue Squadron, but I do think it just had, at this point, people were kind of waiting for the GameCube to come out, and I think people knew that there was going to be a new Rogue Squadron game for the GameCube, so it kind of passed a lot of people by. But this is one that I would actually like to approach. Again, Factor 5 I think just made awesome games, and they didn't really miss. So if we do eventually get a sort of Rogue Squadron collection, I would love to see this also included in the group, although I think that's probably unlikely. Let's get realistic. Alex, did you play Battle for Naboo?
I have no memory of it. I think I was firmly in my like Pokemon era on the Game Boy in 2000. And so, I was sort of, between Game Boy and waiting for Xbox and GameCube, I guess. I wasn't sure what I would get, but I maybe watched one friend play it, and I couldn't tell you anything about it except maybe that, that final fight with the N1 Starfighter or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I'll definitely have to go back and play this one again. This one kind of passed me by, but we'll move on to the GameCube era here, and we're going to be talking about Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader. Now, as we said before, Shadows of the Empire was meant to be a launch title for the N64, but missed the mark. This game was a launch title for the GameCube, and this was one that I played. I think this was the first game I played when I got my GameCube. I fired this up, and I will say, the first time I ever played this game, I was fucking blown away. I was like, what the fuck? I was like, I don't think graphics can get any better than this. I was like, it was the best looking game I'd ever seen in my entire life. It had like pre-rendered cutscenes, just the lighting engine as you're like doing I think it opened on like space battles, right? Like maybe around the Death Star was one of the first levels. And
you're on the Death Star.
Yeah, and I was completely blown away by this game. I think that probably out of all the Rogue Squadron games, this is probably the best one. I loved it so much. Came out 2001. Again, it was Factor 5, like we said. You guys have any thoughts on this one, John?
I was at the E3 where the GameCube and the Xbox made their debut.
Oh, cool.
And this was like the game of the show. Like this was, and again, it was that thing of just like, I don't think I've ever seen anything that looks as good as this. And everybody wanted to get hands-on with Rogue Squadron 2. I still have memories of just like walking through Nintendo's booth and all of the screens. Like we just stood there agog, just mouth open, like, staring up at these screens playing that first level of Rogue Squadron 2. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
It still looks pretty good. It's not... It is not on the bleeding edge like it was at the time. I went back and looked at it and I'm like, hey, it still looks good. It looks nice and solid. I can certainly see why my jaw dropped back in the day. And it was fun. And I think the only GameCube game that I have bopping around the house now is the old pre-order Star Wars arcade disc for Rogue Squadron 2, where was that what it was, or was it 3? That had you pre-ordered it and you got the Star Wars arcade disc. Do you remember that?
I don't remember. That would make sense if it was 3.
Basically, they have a GameCube disc that has the original 80s Vector Star Wars arcade game on a GameCube disc. And that's that and the Ocarina pre-sale disc are the only 2 discs I still have.
Yeah.
Like
that was
my
an epic
collection
one
for GameCube.
Yeah. Absolutely. What about you, Alex? What's your experience with this game?
I never owned a GameCube, but I have very strong memories of going to like Kmart or Target or whatever and like playing Luigi's Mansion and Rogue Leader and being like, oh, I have to get a GameCube. Like, I can't wait to get one. And then like Halo happened and I became an Xbox guy for like most of my life. But like,
so you were playing Obi-Wan for the Xbox instead.
I am like one of the biggest fans of Obi-Wan.
No, that game is terrible.
I love that. It's a terrible game. I love it with my whole heart. But it was one of those things where, you just play those display models on the floor at Sears or whatever. And Rogue Leader just blew you away with how pretty it looked. It was much like Racer on the N64. It was this very focused, polished game as opposed to like the, Shadows of the Empire. Let's do everything for all players. And be a movie. It was much more like, these sort of polished, smaller experiences like we get nowadays, I want to say, almost with like Squadrons or Jedi Survivor, where it's about like a one particular thing. Yeah.
And I think, and we can kind of take this opportunity to just move right into Rogue Squadron 3 as well, which was Rebel Strike. And I think that game, is also a good game, but I think that they started to bite off a bit more than they could really chew. I think that's when they, like I said, they kind of brought in the on foot sections. And I think that I think the game lost a little bit of its magic to me at that point, because I think what made these games look so incredible was the fact that it was all ships, you know, and it's all like hard materials, you know what I mean? It's a lot of stuff in space, which is pretty easy to render and make look good. Like this is really the first time and the last time up until the Switch 2, really, that Nintendo was trying to be competitive with the other big guys as far as like graphics or whatever we're concerned, right? But I think whenever you started like bringing in like the real life people on the ground, I think the controls got a little wonky. I think that's where you're starting to see the limitations of the GameCube a little bit, you know what I mean? And it wasn't quite hitting the same spots for me, but all that told, still a very, very good game. I think Rogue Squadron 3 I really enjoy still to this day. I'd love to see these games all come out again. There was a Wii trilogy re-release of the games that was in development for a while that never released. It's kind of I think there's a Did You Know Gaming episode about that in particular. I think Factor 5 eventually shut down and they weren't able to release that for the Wii, but it would have added motion controls to these games and kind of had all three re-release on the Wii. And sadly, we never saw that. I do believe that there is like a beta build maybe that's sitting around somewhere. I think the game was like almost completed and basically got pulled at the last minute because they lost funding. But still, Rebel Strike is a pretty fun game. Definitely worth playing. And yeah, I hope to see these get re-released at some point. You got to do some lightsaber battles. You got to, walk around on an ATST, a chicken walker, as I affectionately called them back in the day. Anybody, did you play this one, John?
No.
Hopefully
did it come out late in the GameCube cycle, like life cycle?
Oh, yeah, it was like 2003.
Like pretty late.
It was about mid-gen, I think. Yeah. The GameCube was really only around for like 6 years or so. I think, console life cycles are a little bit longer these days, but yeah. Well, we'll move on here and we'll talk about the Wii era of Nintendo exclusive Star Wars games. And we're not going to start with the one that most people probably know, but we're going to start with, because we're going through chronologically here, Star Wars Clone Wars lightsaber duels. This was a Wii exclusive Star Wars game, and I would be very surprised if either of you have played this game. I have not. This is made by Chrome Studios. I think they also developed the Force Unleashed Wii port, which we will get to here in a second. But this was, I think, them first trying out, kind of waggle controls with lightsabers, right? I think that was, whenever we first saw the Wii controller, I think everybody was like, oh, a lightsaber game would be really, really cool to play. And this was them kind of trying to do that. I don't think it really worked out how they wanted to, but I do know a lot of people have a lot of really good memories with this game. Did either of you play this at all? John, are you familiar with this at all?
I remember it. Am I wrong? Wasn't it used to sell Wiis in regards to like before the game came out when the Wii was announced? I mean, you kind of mentioned it as being something people wanted,
right?
But I felt like it was in the pitch was sort of like, imagine playing Star Wars and you're actually like swinging a lightsaber. Like,
right.
I thought it was sort of in that sort of initial pitch to get people fired up about what this could do. And then I never heard anything about the game.
Well, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think it had a little bit of a troubled development cycle as well. I think it was supposed to come out a little bit earlier. Like I said, this came out in 2008, and I believe the Wii released in 2006, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
Yeah, so I think it was supposed to come out a little bit earlier, and they were kind of trying to figure out the tech a little bit. I think this game would have done better if it was in first person, to be honest. I think, like, was it Red Steel? That was, like, the game that I think really showed off, like, the Wii remote as like a sword. It was like a first person game where you could shoot by pointing at the screen, and then you could change to like a katana or whatever and slice people up. This was kind of a little bit more of like a fighting game in a way. You had these duels over the course of like the Clone Wars TV show. And it was really kind of based off like the first like season or so of the TV show as well. Before the TV show, I think really like found its footing and really got on its feet and really got its own identity. I think it was really struggling to find its identity at this point. But it's definitely, it's got a lot of the same voice talent from the TV show. And the graphics have like I think they look pretty good, to be honest. It looks pretty similar to how the show looks. I think they captured the kind of character design and whatnot of the Clone Wars TV show pretty well in this. So this is one that, yeah, if I don't know how easy it is to emulate this these days, because you probably really need a motion controller. But do you have any thoughts on this, Alex?
Not really. I mean, I sort of didn't have the motion control games at this time. There were a lot of like weird little experiments on, Xbox 360 and one with the Kinect as well. And yeah, I don't think I ever played any of those because I wasn't the biggest fan of the Clone Wars at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like that sort of early, like you were saying, the first season or two, you just, I don't know. It took me a while to sort of warm up to the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, it definitely, eventually the Clone Wars became a really excellent TV show, right? But I think in that early days when they released that kind of horrible movie, which was like really just the first 3 episodes of the show, like back to back, but it was not a great start for the series. And then there was a lot of like kind of bumbling Jar Jar episodes and droid episodes and whatnot before the show eventually really found its voice. This was kind of in that era, but I think we should move on then to our last game here of the Nintendo exclusive Star Wars games. And this is the Wii version of The Force Unleashed. Now, you'll know that The Force Unleashed was released for Xbox 360 and PS3 at this time, but the Wii version was not developed by LucasArts like those games were. The Wii version was developed by Chrome Studios, which are the same people that did lightsaber duels. And it's interesting because the version that is on Switch now is a port of the Wii version of the game, right? And I think in a lot of ways, this version was not as well regarded as the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions of the game. I mean, the graphics were certainly a lot more simplistic, but it did have a lot of stuff that was not in the Xbox and PlayStation versions of the game. For one, it had the same kind of motion controls that were in lightsaber duels. So, the team kind of cutting their teeth with that technology in the lightsaber duels game really made its way over to this version of the game. And I think that there was also 5 new levels. There was a duel mode and a few other things as well. But this is definitely notable as kind of a ground up, it was really made in tandem with the other versions of the game. Alex, did you play Force Unleashed?
Yeah, on the 360 mainly. But yeah, it's worth pointing out that it was like this huge multimedia project, kind of like Shadows of the Empire. And so it was a big deal, especially it kind of catered to those people who, like we just said a second ago, like didn't like fall in love with the Clone Wars till maybe season 3 or 4. It was sort of for that older kind of like edgier fan who's like, oh, Revenge of the Sith was the end. Star Wars isn't for me anymore. And then they come out with this very like adult multimedia thing with The Force Unleashed with the, a novel and a comic and, Sam Witwer, who's like become this big Lucasfilm asset because he's basically our Darth Maul now.
Right. Yeah, this was the beginning of Sam Witwer in Star Wars, wasn't it?
I think so. It must have been.
Yeah.
And he's done like a million voices in all the games and cartoons since, but and in Solo, he was Darth Maul's voice in Solo, I guess. But yeah, I mean, The Force Unleashed is such a cool game filled with, great characters. I mean, I think Amy Beth Christensen is her name, is the concept artist who is kind of like one of the brains behind The Force Unleashed. And she's gone on to do a bunch of the concept art for the movies and the TV shows and is like maybe a VP at Lucasfilm now, or was at one point. Mm-hmm. And The Force Unleashed was like, it was like another one of those movie sized projects that just didn't have the movie. And yeah,
totally.
Phenomenal.
I think it's really notable as like, I think the first or one of the first, they didn't really have a ton of games or books or anything that was kind of set between the prequels and the original trilogy, right? And so I think that, this being like, oh, you're the, apprentice to Vader, kind of like hunting down the last remaining Jedi or whatever, this is something that they have really mined a a lot. I think this time period has become where a lot of the, Disney-verse era of Star Wars has really made its home. Like you said, Rebels is a big part of this era here. But yeah, it was definitely in the emo era, right? I think a lot of, it was like everybody was getting tribal tats and listening to, like emo music at this time. And it definitely played to that crowd. What about you, John? Were you a Force Unleashed guy? Did you play this at all?
Yeah, I was in the middle of a game when my house was broken into and my PS3 was stolen.
Oh no!
So I did play it up to a certain point. I've never messed with the Wii version. I'm assuming that force powers were executed by, different Wii motions would do his force stuff.
There was some waggle.
I liked what I played of it, but they never did find my thieves.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
Right.
You deserve better, John. But this is kind of where it ends, at least as far as the consoles are concerned. This was the last of the Nintendo exclusive games. I think every other game that came to a Nintendo console from here on out was multiplat and kind of came to every other console at the time. There were a lot of kind of console specific stuff here, like what was some of the PlayStation ones? It was like Karasai, or what was that fighting game? You know what I'm talking about?
Masters of Terrascasi.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. You guys are both ready on that one. Thank you. That's an insane game. Jedi Power Battles. Like there were a bunch of like PlayStation exclusives. We talk about Obi-Wan as well being an Xbox exclusive. This was kind of the era where Lucasfilm was kind of had their hands in sort of all the pies, trying to see what stuck. It's interesting that so many of these were exclusives and not just all cross-platform. But I suppose we're now in this era where I feel like the console wars are kind of over at this point in a way, right?
There was the Twisted Metal one.
Yes,
there was
Demolition,
was like
Star Wars
Twisted
Demolition.
Metal.
Yeah, I love that game. I played that on Dreamcast, and I was a big fan of that one for sure.
It was fun.
Yeah, I think you could play that one on Switch now. Maybe not. There's a huge like legacy collection of like all the Star Wars games you can get for like $100 or something, with like basically all the Aspire ports. Those are all on the Switch at the moment. But yeah, I suppose I could just quickly talk through some of those. I think everything that's available on the Switch currently, all the Star Wars games, these are going to be in reverse chronological order. I'm just going to list these out. You've got Star Wars Outlaws, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, Force Unleashed, like I said, the Wii version. Episode 1 Jedi Power Battles is now on Switch. Bounty Hunter, Episode 1 Racer, Republic Commando, Battlefront 2, Dark Forces Remastered, which is an excellent remaster, by the way, from our friends at Night Dive Studio. Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast, Jedi Academy, Lego Star Wars, The Skywalker Saga, and Star Wars Pinball are all currently available on the Switch and Switch 2. I know you are a big fan, Alex, of the Knights of the Old Republic games. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I wrote a book about the making of the first one.
Is that one of the what's that book series called?
Boss Fight books.
Yeah. You did that one? Yeah. Hell yeah. I gotta grab that one. That's cool.
That came out in 2019. Yeah.
Very cool.
And honestly, the first KOTOR, that's one of the best ways to play it, because the PC port is kind of rough now. KOTOR 2 on PC, phenomenal. But KOTOR 1, like if you haven't played that, I would say somebody should seek out either the Switch version or maybe the Xbox backward compatibility if they're an Xbox person.
Sure.
But yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, definitely
it's a solid port.
If you're listening to this episode, you should definitely check out that Boss Fight. Is it Boss Fight or Boss Rush books? I keep forgetting.
Yeah. Boss Fight books.
Boss Fight
out
books.
LA.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. I love those. I've got a Derek Hughes Spelunky book that he wrote as well. That's a great series. Yeah. And then I do think it's worth us just giving a little bit of lip service to some of the handheld games that came out. We're not going to talk too much about all of these, but on the Game Boy, you had Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. As we talked about, those were kind of handheld versions of the Super Star Wars games. On Game Boy Color, you had Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. It was like a top-down version of that game. Star Wars Yoda Stories, which is, I think a lot of people really liked that game. Pretty good stuff there. And Star Wars Episode 1 Obi-Wan's Adventure. So those were the Game Boy Color games. Did any of you guys play did you play Yoda Stories, Alex?
I think I fooled around with it or
Yeah.
at one point, but I have no memory of it really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, on the Advance, I played the trilogy Apprentice of the Force, but other than that, I played Empire Strikes Back on the Game Boy Pocket.
That's
So,
right. Yeah.
yeah.
The Game Boy Advance games. We had Jedi Power Battles. We had a port of that. New Droid Army. Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, had its own tie-in game. Flight of the Falcon, which is like a flying game. As you said, Star Wars Trilogy, Apprentice of the Force is a really good game. Actually, I think out of all of the Game Boy Advance Star Wars games, this is probably the best one. It's kind of like a bit of a spiritual successor to the Super Star Wars games, and it's running on, I think it was a Ubisoft game. It's running on the Prince of Persia engine. So it's got really wonderful animations, and I think for the time was just like a very beautiful Game Boy Advance game. We also had an Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith tie-in, and then a couple Lego Star Wars games as well, the video game and Lego Star Wars 2, the original trilogy. That is a pretty comprehensive look at, I think, the Nintendo exclusive Star Wars games. I wonder at this point if we'll ever again see a Nintendo exclusive Star Wars game. I mean, obviously now we have a lot of Lego Star Wars games coming out. I think there's a lot of Star Wars games that get sold primarily on Nintendo consoles, but unless they're doing something Joy-Con specific, like I think some sort of motion thing, I could maybe see them doing another Nintendo exclusive game at some point. But at this juncture, so few Star Wars games actually come out, and they're all like big AAA, multi-million dollar, money sinks that I think it doesn't really make sense for them to do exclusive games anymore at this point. I know Star Wars, what is the most recent? What's the Zynga game that came out? Did that ever come out? Was it Hunters?
Oh yeah, Hunters. It was on the Switch and mobile, and then they canceled the PC port. Yeah,
right. Okay, right. So maybe that counts. Maybe Hunters counts as a Nintendo exclusive game if we're not counting PC as well. But Zynga, God help them. They pivoted to console, and they had some pretty massive layoffs as well. But I think overall, this is a pretty good list, and I think there's a lot of really good games to play in here. And actually looking through it, I feel like only a few of these actually really made their way to the Switch. So I'd love to see a lot of these get re-released. John, you have any kind of final thoughts on any of these games or the state of Star Wars games in general before we move on to the last segment here?
No, I think that what this proves is just there's so much variety under that umbrella. Like there's and sometimes it's not even how much variety there is under the umbrella. Sometimes within the game itself, there's a whole bunch of variety in the game itself. I loved Outlaws. I really did. And it's a shame you talked about the money sink.
Yeah.
I wish it would have done better because it's a very enjoyable, 3D action adventure open world game.
Yeah.
And again, it carries the legacy because even in that game, there's the space battles and there's playing, table games in different cantinas, and there's the shooting and there's the stealth. So it's funny how it may not have been intentional, but unintentionally they've carried the legacy of the Star Wars games over by trying to jam as much Star Wars as they can into one Star Wars thing, which I think is kind of like it's a commonality amongst all the Star Wars games.
Yeah. I agree. And it's a great way to tell more stories in the universe. I think a lot of the games have done better jobs of expanding the universe than any of the new shows have, to be honest. I think out of all the new stuff that's come out, I mean, Andor has been by far my favorite new Star Wars property that's come out in a while. But I think the games really have an opportunity to bring back that kind of like adventurous element that you got from the original movies, right? That you don't really see anymore. They don't really, we've got Starfighter coming out, but it's like we've had this long, desert of no Star Wars movies for a long time. And I think the games really have a good place in the kind of cultural capital for Star Wars to push that forward. Alex, you have any thoughts before we finish off the main topic here?
Oh, just that, I mean, there's so many different games. And so every time I see like the Mortal Kombat Classic Collection or the Ninja Turtles Cowabunga Collection or whatever they called that one, like, I mean, you could make like 5 or 10 Star Wars ones, Mm-hmm. So I always hope and pray that we'll get something like that in the near future because there's a lot that you can play on modern hardware thanks to like Aspire and Night Dive and those guys. But there's so much stuff that you just have to emulate or watch a YouTube video. And so that's a shame, I love those sort of museum style collections.
Me too.
Star Wars is such a no brainer. Like, I mean, people are going to buy that. So
yeah,
hopefully the licensing stars align at some point.
Yeah. And look, no shade on Aspire, but I'd also love to see some other companies take a crack at doing some of the remasters as well. Because I think what Aspire does really well is they just give you the game as it was, and it's in high def, and it's basically a port. But I do think, like you said, something that I really loved was that re-release of Dark Forces, right? Like, I think the Dark Forces remaster done by Night Dive, it's like they really pulled out all the stops and all the bells and whistles. And then, like you said with Tetris Forever, seeing the documentary stuff and the kind of playable timeline and everything like that, I think that there's a world in which some of these games could really benefit from that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for the main topic here. What do you think about Nintendo exclusive Star Wars games or Star Wars games in general? Listener, we would love to hear your thoughts. As we said at the top, leave a comment on the YouTube video below, hit us up on the Discord or social media, and we'll be sure to shout you out next episode. But I think with all of that out of the way, we're going to move into our last bit of the show, which is the games we've been playing recently. So, like I said, I've been playing a little bit of games this past week. I was out of town, so I didn't have a ton of time to play games. The majority of what I've been playing has been actually a game that I'm not allowed to talk about yet. I have a review code pre-release of a game that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. It's an indie game, and I've been enjoying it quite a bit, and I can't wait to talk about it. I'll be able to talk about it next week on the podcast. But yes, it's a very unique and interesting game, and that's all I'll say right now. But I've been enjoying that quite a bit. I've also, as I said, been playing quite a bit of my AYN Thor handheld. So, I'm playing a lot of 3DS games and emulating, DS games here and there, and that's been a lot of fun. But one game I do want to shout out, I know I talked about this last week on the show, which is Fantavision for the PlayStation 2. I played that on my AYN Thor, and then I was looking up the soundtrack for that game because I was like, there's no way this game got like a vinyl release for the soundtrack, right? Because I collect video game vinyl. But when I was looking up the soundtracks, I did find that there was a game called Fantavision 2020X, which I'd never heard of. And then I just realized they've remade the original Fantavision. It was released a couple years ago for the PlayStation VR, and I bought it on Steam. It was on sale for like $7 over Black Friday. So I ended up picking this up, even though I just played the game basically on PS2. I wanted to support because I think Fantavision is such a unique, interesting, it's such an interesting kind of game. It's kind of a puzzle fireworks game, right? But I think it looks really, really nice, and I think the remake is actually pretty well done. I don't have a good VR headset for it right now, but I think eventually, whenever I get the Steam frame, it'll be nice to have this in my library to play this in VR whenever that eventually comes out. But big Fantavision fan. If you are craving more Fantavision 2020X is a pretty good game to play. But what about you, John? What have you been playing lately?
I was gifted a copy of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 from a friend who was like, this feels like a John game, because I kind of have a very open heart towards rough around the edges, ambitious, story-driven games.
Yeah.
And it was exactly that, and he was very right. It was sort of my cup of tea, like mildly janky, conversationally driven with, with repetitive combat. It's not that I like bad games. I don't think the game's bad. I think it may be undervalued just based on the weight of expectations that were set for it. But I've been quite enjoying the voice acting and the writing in the game, especially. I think it's pretty on point. If there's other elements of the game that aren't that great, I think those things work really well. But while I was playing that, there was a big update for Fallout 4. Fallout 4 is always my fallback when I'm not playing anything. I tend to always go back and play Fallout 4. So if I'm between games, that's constantly there. Then the other one for me was that the same friend that gifted me Vampire was like, hey, I'm going to loan you some games. He has a gaming podcast as well called Stage Select. And he was like, hey, I want you to be on the best of the year. I'm going to loan you a stack of games to play before we do our best of the year. And one of the games in the stack was Ghost of Yotei.
Yeah.
Yotei. And I kind of bounced off of the other game in that series.
Yeah, me too.
I started it and was like, this is fine. I get it. I played maybe 3-4 hours and was like, I get it. I'm good. And didn't go back to it. This one gripped me right away. And part of it was it's incredibly beautiful from go. The other thing was that the story was so simple that I was immediately invested, which is these warlords come in, they kill this family, they stab a little girl through a tree and set the tree on fire, and she lives. And so she's like, I'm going to take down each one of those warlords. And it was like so cut and dry. And I was immediately invested. And I was like, all right. And I've been playing a lot of that. And then over the Thanksgiving week, a friend recommended Dispatch to me. And so I picked up Dispatch when I got back from out of town for Thanksgiving. And I'm enjoying it. I like the gameplay. I like the world that it's in. I think it's funny. I kind of have a beef with games that give the illusion of choice, where you don't know until you play it a second time that it didn't matter what you said. And it's funny, as dialogue driven as Dispatch is, it'll give you like 3 choices. And I played through the first chapter over at his place, and then I played through the first chapter here and chose opposite choices of what I chose at his place. And the response from the character was the same. But you don't know that until you play it a second time, that really what you're doing, it's all illusion of choice.
Right.
Yeah, your character says that line of dialogue out loud, but then the other character responds the exact same way that they did when you chose the other thing. Those kind of games typically, like, I get a little... I would prefer games that, like, you make your choice and that has the ripple effect. I don't... Sure. It's like, why even give me the choice if the answers are the same?
If I'm not mistaken, I think the game was originally going to be an animated series. I think they were trying to make it as a TV show, and then they like couldn't get the funding for it, and then eventually like pivoted to making it a game. So it wouldn't surprise me if they were like, we're not gonna like change the story too much. We're not gonna make it like too branching
that it takes.
Yeah, but I mean the game is really blown up. Like it's a huge hit. So I think that in a sequel it'll probably be a little bit more like actually branching, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's so witty and the gameplay is so unusual that I am having a good time. But it was shocking to me firing it up and kind of going like, oh, all these choices are fake choices.
But anyway, what about you, Alex? What have you been playing recently?
Well, I'm the same way with Fallout 4. That's my like fallback comfort game. I don't know if it's my favorite game ever. Maybe it's just like it's cozy. So yeah, same thing with the update in Fallout 4. Destiny 2 has a Star Wars themed expansion that launches tomorrow. So
is that the Renegades expansion?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I've got like thousands and thousands of hours in Destiny, unfortunately. So that's always on there too.
Yeah.
Call of Duty Search and Destroy with my brother is another fixture in my rotation. And then the sort of story-driven single-player games that I've been doing besides Fallout 4 have been The Outer Worlds 2, which I want to say I'm like maybe 75% of the way through that one. And then Mafia, The Old Country. I don't know. I'm probably a third of the way through that. That's really impressive. I really dig those Mafia games.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm always playing 1,000 things, but those are kind of the main ones.
Yeah, I know. For a while there, I was actually doing like pretty good, I think, with actually completing games. But I am back on my bullshit, just like starting a game, playing it for like an hour and then moving on to something else. I like really need to lock in and I'm unemployed right now too. So it's like I have time to like actually sit and like play games to completion, but my ADD brain is like been going burr lately. But hopefully you can actually make some progress in Mafia, The Old Country here. I've heard that's a great, is that a remake of the first game or is it a brand new game?
This one is a prequel. So Definitive Edition came out in 2020. That's the remake of the original. I love that game. That was phenomenal. And so The Old Country is like, it goes back before any of the others. And I think there's some Easter eggs and character threads, but it feels kind of just like a standalone, old timey Italy game with like the sort of rise of organized crime and, you're running around collecting debts and stuff.
Very cool.
Farming and whatnot.
Yeah, it's Yakuza for Italians. But I think that's going to do it then for our episode on Star Wars games. Alex and John, thank you guys so much for coming on. It was a real delight to have you both. I'd love to have you both back on again sometime.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Of course. And I'd also like to give a thanks to Corduroy for doing our music. Thanks to MilkyWay.co for doing our website. Thanks to all of our patrons on Patreon. And if you'd like to find me online, I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And what about you, Alex? Where can people find you online?
I'm at Blue Sky at Alex J. Kane, or I'm on Twitch streaming games sometimes now at Jural Plays, Jural, which is kind of a Star Wars video game reference that only means anything to me, but
very good. Well, it's fitting for the episode, I suppose. John, what about you? Where can people find you online?
The good stuff's on Blue Sky at Gholson, Gholson. The acting only stuff is on Instagram at Mr. All Spelled Out Gholson. Can I plug my movie?
Please do. Yeah.
Am I allowed to plug my movie?
You guys can plug whatever. This is the time for you to plug your shit. Yeah.
Friday, December 5th is the release of Man Finds Tape, where it is a found footage horror film mockumentary where I play the evil Reverend Endicott Carr. If you're a Destiny fan, Brian Villalobos, who plays Lodi in Destiny 2, is one of the characters in Man Finds Tape. It comes out on VOD, and then it plays Austin, New York, and LA on the 5th of December.
Very good. Definitely make sure you check out Man Fights Tape, whether you're seeing it in theaters this weekend or on VOD, like you said. I can't wait to see that. I always love seeing you on the big screen, John. It's such a delight. I'm so glad to see you make this pivot in your career to acting. It's really fantastic. And you're a wonderful actor. I'm sure you hear that all the time, but I'm a big JG fan. Of course. And then if you'd like to find our show on social media, we are at Switch Headz on Blue Sky and Twitter, at Super Switch Headz on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We have a website, switchheadz.com. And then we have a Discord, a Patreon, and a Facebook group. We'll have links to all three of those in the description of this episode, whether you're watching it on YouTube or you're listening on Apple or Spotify. Leave us a review over on those two platforms. Leave a like, a comment, and a subscribe over on YouTube. Tell all your friends about the show. Try to spread this shit around. Word of mouth goes a really long way. We really love our community here, and join us on the Discord. Speaking of community, we have one of the best Discords on the entire fucking internet, a group of non-toxic gamers. If you enjoy the conversation here, we will continue it over there on the Discord. We really would love to have you join us over there. We'll have links to that in the description of this episode. That's going to do it, gang. Wow. Can't believe it. We did it. We talked about Star Wars. I am a Star Wars fan, man. Oh, this is making me just want to play a bunch of more Star Wars games. I think I might have to do that. But next week, don't touch that dial, because we have two very special guests joining on our Metroid Prime 4 Beyond episode. I cannot wait to play this game. It comes out tomorrow, so it is going to be a blast to finally get my hands on this long-awaited game. So tune in for that. But other than that, folks, you know the deal. Be safe out there. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. May the Force be with you and all that shit. Fuck ICE. Free Palestine. We love you very much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.